White Goose in the South Seas is a 1951 real romantic comedy animated film starring Betty Boop and Gandhi Goose. So, this is where the story begins. Our story begins where Gandhi Goose stranded the water, sitting in the wooden raft due to the shipwreck. The bottle swirls around the water and in the beach. Betty Boop was upset because of the situation and he eats nothing but shoes. But, here come the sight, something strange for Gandhi, he spotted the island. And so, the waves plops out of there. So Gandhi attempted to crack the coconut, but moments later, he bonks his head into his fate. Then, unrock and the wood pretend, as a barbecue sandwich. Gandhi tries to eat his food, unfortunately, he chomps and breaks his tooth and suffers a depression. Suddenly, Betty arrives and met him. She invents the number of tools, Yoda, Iggy and Larry build the popularity house. But, there's a flying squirrel spies on him and captures Gandhi. Betty came back from his home, she was shocked because of Gandhi's clothes and shoes on the sand. The plush actors mourn about Gandhi's capture, Betty sings a lost love, before she cried. Meanwhile, Gandhi was put into the big pot. See? Big pot? I get it. So, this is the whole plot. Rocky, who was disguised as native, orders Gandhi to hop on pot to cook himself with vegetable. This was called goose-aligned soup, but to hold the onions. He start to feel heat and signs his death. He looks out of the big cauldron and Rocky performs tribal dance. But, he reveals a squirrel fur. Gandhi realized that he's pulling the prank on him. Rocky tries to order Gandhi back into the big pot, but mocks him. However, the lightning struck, it was the frightening tropical island. Betty, who disguised herself as evil spirit that it was frightened away from those evil natives. Rocky sprinkled the salts into Gandhi's tail and chomps it. He screamed over to the land of Pike, grabs him and starting cussing, while runs away to the popularity house. Iggy and his friends looking for him. As he leaves to the house, Gandhi felt very bad about him as well as Yoda, Iggy and Larry. So, he just looked at the spirit's shield, and revealed to her human self, Betty Boop and reunited him. But suddenly, there's more of the scariest natives would like to eat self or so. And he declares, barbecue cats. Or should I say, seize them. Betty scares away from the beach and swoops off as well as Iggy, Yoda and Larry and it was chased by natives. Gandhi and Rocky just pretending how it does came to be happened, but overlooking the fracas. Turn both heads over to see a child of natives, and he says barbecue goose and squirrel. Rocky and Gandhi both scared away and started chasing him. And that's the end of the story about Gandhi and Rocky chased by native. The film was going to be part of this novel, White Shadows and the South Seas by Frederick O'Brien. This short was voiced by Tom Morrison, Mae Questel, June Foray, Mel Blanc, the man of 1,000 voices, and the plush actors. It was animated by Thomas Johnson and Tom Morrison and uncredited animators, music by Philip Skeeb and A.D.J. Guevara, produced by Paul Terry and Max Fleischer and directed by Dave Fleischer and Manny Davis. The cartoon was released on June 2, 1950 by Terratoons and 20th Century Fox. The film was reissued in 1964 and again in 1974 by Paramount Pictures. Because of racial stereotypes, this film was placed under the unethical ban for broadcast or video distribution. However, it did air twice on Disney Channel prior ban and have them released on video collection. This film restored and released on DVD. And that's Goose. Let's get to the behind-the-scenes production of White Goose in the South Seas. On April 29, 1950, 5 weeks before Gandhi and Handy with Betty Boop cartoon, Park of the Reserve was released, Paul Terry, creator of Gandhi Goose, Mighty Mouse and other characters, and Max Fleischer, who was lost hope of the brother, Dave, decided to come up with the idea to make Betty and Gandhi cartoon. I became a composer in the Terratoon studio in Chicago, since in Oxford in 1944. While making of the cartoon and after Rhapsody in Slap was completed, me and Chuck, Charles M. Jones were left the studio and boarded the ship to Marquesas Islands to see the native village. I was drawn to the original layouts to take a look in this rarest pieces of this beautiful beach, especially the waters of the ocean, where Gandhi was stranded. I was in a situation about what happened to the book, and I was going too much for which. When originally, I was started suggesting Yoda, Iggy and Larry for the African savages role, but Chuck Jones agreed to change from native to tropical foreman. When the three plushies took on a set, I set the camera on the sand and filmed it. After the same day filming at this island, things most particularly whenever I was built every house in the island, even though for the castaway and not allowed visitors. They filmed in the morning scene for plush actors. In the jungle scene, me and Charles Jones went to the jungle to film it. Plush actors would head to look for it and run out of the jungle. In the inside of the native village, they filmed in seek of the plush actors. Him and I are filming in the native village where Gandhi hops in pot, but the present on location that made me even more difficult to work on. Though, it was the greatest confirmation ever thought of it before releasing it. Too difficult to find, but it's not for everything about natives and savages. What, if it's the lion and ostrich? Maybe I concerned that it was professional locations that I went to Africa. Cartoons are scientist. This is why me and Charles Jones went out to see the lagoon to see natives, real natives, and it wasn't offended. Still, it didn't had to be anything about tropical island information. Again, Charles Jones filmed Iggy, Larry and Yoda cheering and shocking. In the inside the jungle out for the ocean, they filmed the plush actors run away from the island. Me and Chuck Jones wrapped filming for our island and boarded the ship back to Chicago. When I come back to Terratoon's studio with the film, Mayquestel looked at the film about plush actors going to an island with the number of takes. After the conference, the animators were draw Gandhi stranded in the water. For which, Betty Boop was upset about the situation. Before animators and layouts took to the camera department, June Foray and Mel Blanc approached the studio. Many of our thoughts has been outdated for cartoon, me decided to do work with Mel Blanc. Well, I started plan to make an live action / animated film, Un Diablo de los Rancheros for Mexican audience, and was developed in Spanish film. Especially, Jesse L. Lasky Jr. will be happy about it, we'll get to this soon. Back on track. Before animation screening, me and Mel Blanc screened the film test about the plush actors in a tropical island, but even that was an own risk. Throughout the day and throughout the night, the cell animation came in and backgrounds are started painting just like me drawn in this island. In for one reason. Manny Davis directed the film would likely interested in a romantic tropical beach. Earl Duvall, director of the Warner Brothers cartoons, recorded the voices for Mayquestel as Betty Boop with voice impressions. While Tom Morrison continued voicing Gandhi Goose, June Foray providing the voice of Rocky, later Rocket J, Rocky Squirrel from Rocky and Bullwinkle, and Mel Blanc providing three voices like Parrot, Stuttering Voice, Pygmy and the Savage Natives. When Roland Crandall was going to editing room, where they cut those final product animatic scenes and edited, while I edited those plushie to combine together. Due to some incarnations of Blanc, me and Philip Skeeb collaborate and compose the music in the film that were recorded in takes. With all the comparations and reflections, the film was completed on May 20, 1950. The film was shelved once Park of the Reserve was premiered on May 26, 1950. And once Rhapsody in Slap premiered on May 30, 1950. The film was premiered in Carthay Circle Theatre just like Snow White, on June 1, 1950 and later released in the US the next day. A.D.J. Guevara was seen to be difficult for which and noted, well, those films are not bad, but not as confusion as I thought to be. Max Fleischer agreed with the other conditions which was the best retro comments ever, you ain't thought that black films are too influent to this novel. Even though one day, it is a lost love of Betty Boop or the Mourners. Paul Terry realized it, how it looked like, never thought, that the theater will did the same thing for the films in Chicago. This is, how it became a release product of this cartoon. This film considered not only a lost love film, but was offensive cruelty film. A.D.J. Guevara worried that it was the savage natives in tropical island look like black savages. This is not the time for the day it did happen to Betty Boop's anguish mourn. It wasn't keep away from this happening. The anguish people had been traumatized and passed out. Gail Russell told me that it was misbelieved throughout the theater. It could be something had an idea to take this film reel to the Terratoons vault. Although, it was banned for good. For a decade, the film re-released in 1964 by Paramount Pictures, to great reviews in a state and again in 1974. I was concerned after Gold Medal was ended in 1980 and due to the duplication of the racial stereotypes, this was placed to an official ban for TV broadcast or video distribution for Paramount. I was going to preserved in 1999, before I was left to another countries for the missing U.S version of Hiroshi's Phantasmagory episodes. Another decades later, Disney Channel aired Betty and Gandhi cartoons along with Terratoons cartoons. However, it would only 2 airings of White Goose in the South Seas for original release, one in 2012 and another in 2017 before locked away in Paramount Vault forever. In 2020, Jeffrey Animation Studio received a copy of the 1974 reissue for 1950 cartoon. It would preserved, color corrected, scratches and dirt film removed, and audio scratch removed as well. Nonetheless, the film was released under Betty and Gandhi Cartoon Romances in 3 volumes on DVD and Blu-ray.